Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the Halftime Talk feature interview series. I'm delighted today to be joined by Mr. Patrick Kulsen, CEO of Insights Global, based in the Netherlands. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for
Well, as we
this
can see,
opportunity. Huh?
fantastic to have you. And as we can see from your backdrop there, tank terminals, data services, analysis and reports, Insights Global, obviously very involved with market intelligence and technology and data on liquid bulk markets, and a lot to talk about, really. So let's get down to it. Obviously, you're based in Europe, and perhaps we can then expand the conversation a bit beyond that. But let's start with the global outlook, if you like, and get your point of view on storage inventories, because we deal with people every day and commentary on the oil markets. The current outlook, obviously, for demand versus supply. And we had somebody on one of our programs just yesterday saying that inventories, while important, are being paid less attention to these days. There's much more on people's minds. Again, from a tank storage point of view, are tank owners as well and terminals finding it as difficult as others to predict what the outlook is for demand and how they should manage, if you like, their inventory as well?
Yes, well, definitely. So I think, if you look at the current situation and the sort of the future, we're sort of at this turning point where, people don't really understand or are having very much trouble in trying to, sort of predict what the future is going to be, because, it's not stable anymore. So we have the energy transition, where some people, if you really go through in this, some people will think that the oil demand is going down, which obviously will impact demand for storage as well, and trade flows. You have the alternative fuels, which will sort of substitute a part of the demand for liquid petroleum products. Hydrogen. So, there's a lot of uncertainty from that theme, the energy transition. Now, on the other hand, you have this whole sort of geopolitical situation where, things are changing. The West is becoming less dominant. China is getting bigger and bigger. How is that going to impact global trade flows? So, there's a lot of question marks from that point of view.
Absolutely.
So if you look at tank storage, it's actually even more complicated, because they need to understand, sort of regional demand, regional supply, and trade flows, because those terminals are ultimately sort of made for facilitating all these flows. So,
Well, I mean, let me
quite
pick you up on that
complicated.
point of flows, because those trade flows have changed a lot, haven't they, in the last couple of years, particularly in and out of Europe, Russia, Ukraine, etc. Diversion of fuel, different longer lead times to get to where it wants to go.
Yeah.
The impression we get is that the European storage business has adjusted well to that. But how much of a challenge has that been? And do you think it's installed any new permanent features, if you like, to those who are operating those tanks in Europe?
No, definitely. So, the last, it seems like, how do you say that,
3 years now.
contradictory, but it has been, it's hard to say, but it has been actually quite good business for storage the last couple of years, because a lot of their clients view tanks as a sort of an insurance policy for things that might happen, just in case instead of just on time. Which results in more demand for tank storage capacity. And there's also been a lot of opportunity for traders to make profits. So if you look at the profits from companies like Trafigura or Vitol, they've been quite elevated the last couple of years. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the energy transition in your opening comments. Again, your terminals and storage tanks sort of adapting to that, particularly in Europe, which is ahead in the energy transition compared to other regions where I sit at the moment in the Middle East, for example, in terms of fuels and storage terminals. I mean, is that a big ask for European tank storage owners to convert some of their tanks for, SAF, biofuels, etc.? It's already being done, perhaps incrementally. Um,
Yes.
is it happening fast enough, in your opinion?
Well, I think so, definitely, even maybe too fast, because sometimes they convert and please keep in mind that the storage industry is a service-oriented business, right? So they follow their clients, right? And the clients, they saw opportunities in biofuels, but in some cases they were maybe too quick, and yeah, things, it's quite a dynamic market, so things change. And sometimes you see, well, they converted its tanks, but they're giving them back again because there's no business, or not a profitable business. So I think this whole transition is also causing additional uncertainty on what business is profitable, what
Yeah.
kind of business models actually work. Do we want to produce it locally or import it? What kind of feedstocks do we need? It's quite complicated, and
Yeah.
nobody really knows at this moment how it is going to play out.
What we do
Uh,
know, for example, I mean, putting the transition fuels aside, is that even traditional refinery activity in Europe is shifting, isn't it?
yes,
Because of the transition as well, maybe also, but also, from the economic side of things, there's more growth in refining, in Middle East, Asia, some refineries in Europe shutting down. That impacts obviously automatically the storage, perhaps positively. Obviously, there's more demand on just in time, if you like, storage as well. And just in case, how is that being taken also by your sector, or the sector that you track, the storage sector, in terms of that deindustrialization of Europe
yeah, yeah.
gradually, and more stuff happening east?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it's perceived as a problem for storage. For in the, let's say, in the short term, it's positive for storage because they might import more products, and they need tanks for that. But yeah, for the whole economy and for their clients, it's generally speaking not such a good development. So there's a sense. So I just came back from Berlin, from the EPCA, and there was this sort of a sense of crisis, almost, that a lot of plants are being shut down, that other companies are not making any money anymore. So I think something needs to change, and yeah, that's sort of my opinion. I think we're sort of are too far ahead of the rest of the world in this energy transition, which makes it, yeah, how do you say that, too costly for Europe to continue on this path. And so, in my view, we should be at a sort of a same pace compared to the US and China, because otherwise, the factory will just close down in Europe, and be the
Shifted
new,
elsewhere.
shifted to the Middle East, or the US or China.
Yeah,
And well,
absolutely.
the climate won't benefit from that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And I mean, certainly, well, exactly. And certainly there is, I mean, there's a lot of ambitious plans, isn't there? Here, I mean, in Fujairah, we cover that market here in the UAE as well. Lots of companies coming in, and obviously other hubs, apart from Singapore, growing. I mean, do you think we face a possible oversupply in tankage, whether you pull them all together? I know each hub deals with different regions, but could we be seeing an oversupply in tank storage happening in the planning?
well, that's yeah, as you sort of mentioned, it's tank storage is very much a local business, right? So you need to zoom in on the local sort of dynamics and
Yeah.
and, and trade flows. So some regions might see an increase in demand, and maybe sort of sort of incentivize additional investment in there in that region. Other regions might have less need for tank storage. So it's a little bit hard for me to say for places like Fujairah or Singapore. I think if you look at the US and Europe for let's say for the time being, I think it's well supplied. There's no oversupply yet or something like that. Especially in Europe, there's not much sort of investment in fuel
Mm.
tanks. Mostly converting those tanks into biofuels. You see some investment in chemical storage, which looking at the current situation, I don't know if that's such a good idea. But nevertheless,
But the chemicals market is certainly growing, isn't it? I mean, the future is in petchems and chemicals, isn't it? That's the one that's going to survive
yes, well,
after
that's
gasoline and after, diesel, etc.
yes, but you do need some sort of industrial cluster
Yeah.
attached to that, and what we just discussed, that the deindustrialization of Europe is a problem from that point of view.
Yeah.
So that's why especially in the chemical markets, people were really worried. And you had you had this room full of people, and these producers, they were all sort of depressed. Storage people were okay because they said, well, either
Some of
they
those
we
some of those producers are very happy. Covestro just got bought by ADNOC recently. Yeah,
yeah yeah
that
yeah
was so maybe that's an opportunity for some European companies.
yes
Let's Patrick, let's talk a bit about your the technology side of things, because of course that's a big part of what you do in terms of data services, analysis
yeah
of data, that information that you can collate and inform the market with AI, etc. Where do you think we're going with that? How much has that transformed data collection, analysis, application, particularly in terms of also shipping that feeds into this all, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. So shipping, if you want to know where a ship is going, or assuming that they're not turning off their AAS signals or
Yeah.
something, then that's quite easy, and also what cargo is on board, etc. That's sort of becoming a quite, let's say mainstream, and there are various suppliers that can give you that information. What becomes more, let's say, complicated, or still in our view won't be replaced by sort of AI, is more the commercial side of the business. Like what kind of prices have been agreed upon, because that's typically sort of done in private and
One.
confidential negotiations. So you need to actually talk to people, and you can't find it on the internet. And
Mm.
well, that's I think where our value lies, and just to talk to people. Obviously, we will, and we already do that. We take advantage of all the technology that is out there. But still, having access to a network of people that trust you, and that you work with for years and years, provides value by getting, let's say, hard to uncover information.
Yeah, old-fashioned relationships, old-fashioned communication, huh?
Yes, yes,
Something that you can't get off the internet anyway.
I
But
guess.
Patrick, I mean, you touched on the AIS systems. I mean, not to go down that rabbit hole, but yes, there's a lot of oil moving around, off the grid, let's say. I mean, we know when it gets to a destination, perhaps organizations like yours can tell what's been delivered, but of course, until it does, what's flowing, what's on the water. Obviously a lot of Russian oil making its way east. Luckily for Russia, that hasn't been disrupted, and obviously the oil has continued to flow. But again, I mean, do you see that as something that the markets, the rest of the market, the logistics, has adjusted to? Is there worry about choke points being disrupted next year because of geopolitics, and how might that impact how the storage industry may view things?
Yeah, so I think so. Just to answer your question on the Russian flows, so there is not really that much impact on flows. Well, there is. It's all been adjusted, and some countries yeah don't want any Russian oil. Others well they don't really care. And that has adjusted, and I think from that point of view, yeah, the whole sanction policy of the West has sort of failed. The only effect that you see right now is, and that you saw in the past, is that there is this discount on Russian oil, which has some effect obviously on the revenue stream. But for the rest, it's sort of yeah, business as usual now to deal with this. Yeah, so that's one sort of element. The other element is, yeah, the whole sort of situation in the Red Sea with the risk of being attacked for shippers. Yeah, obviously that is elevating freight rates because you either need to take the risk to go through the Red Sea, or you go for around Africa,
Yeah,
which is a much longer trip. So that means that the
feeds into
freight
the
rates go
cost.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
it feeds into the consumer, I suppose.
Yes.
Patrick, what about decarbonization sort of within the midstream sector, on infrastructure, the hard assets, if you like. I mean, there is lots of pressure on decarbonizing on upstream, on the refining as well. Midstream sector doesn't emit as much, admittedly, but also, like, is there, apart from the fuels themselves that are being stored, but in terms of the tankage, the terminals, the pipelines, etc., do you see that part of the chain is rethinking how it could be doing things? Should it be? Does it need to be?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. So that's quite a hot topic in Europe, to reduce emissions, and you have different types of emissions. They call it scope 1, 2, and 3. Now, scope 1 and 2 is mainly aimed at the things that have sort of direct impact on the operations of yourself, like the terminal. And
Yeah.
that's not that hard to reduce. So you can sort of invest in technical solutions to reduce those emissions. And that's not that hard. Well, if you look at scope 3 emissions, then it's a different story, yeah, because then it's basically trying to reduce the emissions across the whole supply chain from your client and up to
Yeah.
your supplier. So that's totally different. So if you look at shipping, we're seeing fuel oil being sort of blended with biofuels as a way to reduce emissions. But also more technical solutions like these sort of fixed wing sails on top of ships that sort of reduce the need for fuel consumption.
And I mean, our
Like in the
shippers, do you think, I mean, again, with all the IMO directives as well that come up and to direct that, there's always been a bit of a hesitancy, not always, but there is hesitancy, repurposing ships, for example, making that investment for new fuels. Again, as we were saying, Europe's moving, in your opinion, a bit too fast on that front. And shippers have to adjust to that as well, make big investments, sort of banking on how much new fuel or alternative fuel they'll be taking, and all the new directives on cleaning up their ships, if you like. Is there consensus within that sector of what needs to be done, or do you feel there's a hesitancy, people hold back because the directives change too often?
Yes, well, there again, it's the same story. There's no clarity on what the sort of future technology or
Yeah.
future fuel will look like. And until that moment, most, but there might be some experimenting here and there. Yeah? But the sort of the general, let's say, population of ships, is still going to choose for the most the cheapest option. and the most well adapted option, which is fuel oil. I don't see that changing until the whole, let's say, global shipping community agrees on, what the next step will be,
Yeah,
because
which
otherwise,
which is hard to
yeah,
see them agreeing on it. Okay, Patrick, one more question to you then. In terms of global collaboration, global agreement, I mean, this the carbon price topic is always, out there in terms of, there are carbon credits now. There's different mechanisms that people can use already. But again, this sort of consensus on a global carbon price and how different regions, as we said, have to move at their own pace with that. But at the end, the emissions are a global problem, aren't they? So, I mean, do
yes.
you see that carbon price, different, schemes and mechanisms even within Europe are aiding in this predictions on how fast people can move with their investments towards one or the other, or is it leading to more confusion in the sense of, because of the lack of consensus, that investment becomes a bit more problematic?
Yeah, I feel it's quite a problem. People are obviously looking at, how they can sort of reduce emissions in shipping, and well, we have the ETS system in Europe, which is being
Yeah.
implemented. Well, it's already sort of being implemented in Europe for shipping, and it's sort of gradually being rolled out in different steps. But yeah, in order to make this work, all the other regions need to step in as well, because otherwise, it will probably again lead to some sort of relocation of business from
Yeah.
Europe to other regions. That's my feeling, and I don't think that's a good thing, because, as you said, emissions are global, and it doesn't make sense to sort of relocate something which is also energy intensive, obviously. So, in the end, I don't think it will,
Certainly
help a lot.
on the political front, whether you look at Europe or the US, the direction is not going in the way which is going to support
No,
that way of thinking, at least not at the moment. Patrick Kulsen, CEO of Insights Global, thanks so much for joining us today on
thank
Halftime Talk.
you.
It's been great to have you.